And kind of bringing it back to your experience too, in that kind of moment, and I don't know specifically if you've had a moment like this at some of the big meets that you've been to, but when you know that you're the top seed, and when you know kind of now bringing it to as you approach the block, as the goggles are on and you're ready to go, you hear the final buzzer and you get going. What's going through your head as you're preparing, as you're walking up to the block to get ready for a big race that you know people are targeting you for?
Honestly, I think when I was younger, when I was, a freshman or a sophomore and I was ranked really high, I think my sophomore year I was ranked first coming in
Mm-hmm.
to the 400 IM Horizon League. With that, um, definitely a ton of pressure,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to learn, and I don't mean this in the way that like I deeply care about swimming, but you have to learn not to care in the moment
Sure.
about anything that's going on around you. And you have to learn how to care even, you know, after those results are finalized. So, this is a big learning curve for me. It's like I stopped looking at times, I stopped looking at numbers, I stopped looking at rankings. I stopped looking at Swim Cloud, which is our ranking system
Mm-hmm.
for swimming, and I started looking at how can I just do the best that I can in every single race. So, and I think honestly, that is like you see that a lot. You see that one of my favorite races to watch at Olympic trials. I got to watch this live was Dressel's 100 free. He didn't make the 100 freestyle uh, Olympic team. He
Mm-hmm.
made the Olympic team for the relay because he got, I believe it was third. But watching the smile on his face, especially over a guy who self-deprecates in his journal, like you look at his journal, there's a lot of just you're awful, you can do better. Seeing the smile on his face and him actually enjoy the sport of swimming, that was the best thing that I've watched. So, you know, I think taking that into consideration. Just you're here to swim and you're here to swim the best that you possibly can. And if you didn't, well, then you know what to do in the next race. But to just completely, as a first place contender, I think you have to do this as somebody who's one of the top swimmers. You have to wipe out that sense of, times, how other people are swimming, and just get in there, swim the best that you can, and race. And that made me win Olympic trials, that mindset, instead of worrying over numbers and stuff like that. And I think that's the best way when you're a team that's on top or a swimmer that's on top, especially in the Olympics.
Yeah, I would imagine that the goal is to kind of lighten the load on yourself. Like you mentioned that you're standing on the shoulders of giants, or that they're standing on you, to kind of lighten that weight mentally. I'm sure is a big key and kind of drives all of that, right?
Yep. Yep. There was Popovici actually said he doesn't think when he gets in the pool. He just shuts off his brain. He shuts off his body. He said I think he said he shuts off his body too because he knows what he's done in the pool. It's just time to do what you've done in training.
Yeah,
You
kind of
know
rely on the muscle memory of it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then during the race, kind of going to that, I'm curious from your perspective, and I have some high school swimming experience. Shout out Dakota Cougars, 2020 Macomb County champions. You're welcome.
Hmm.
Uh, I got like 15th in the 500, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
but but
That's points.
yeah, but in the race, it's different between sprinting events or mid distance or distance events. You had more of the mid distance stuff, 400 IM, 200 fly, that kind of range.
Hmm.
What's going on in your brain while you're swimming? For me, I kind of relied on whatever music I purposely got stuck in my head, but not so much talking to myself while I'm racing. What about you? What's playing in your mind as you're racing? What's kind of going through your mind?
That's an interesting question because I don't think I remember a lot of my races, which is
That's
it's
understandable.
it's 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 interesting to say, but like I do hear this with a lot of swimmers. It's like they just don't. They swim their race and they're like, I don't remember anything that happened. But
Yeah,
I will
I have that
say,
experience too. Yeah.
um, with the IM, what kind of especially helped me is like that last length. I'd mentally prepare myself for the next stroke. I
Hmm.
think some people kind of feel like they're thrown into the next stroke. Um, So I do that a little bit, and maybe some niche things like my turn, or um, being able to time my backstroke to breaststroke, because I do a bucket turn, like, which is basically like a full-on backflip in the water.
Yeah, I've seen that like different swimmers have different ways to do that. I never
Yeah.
learned the bucket turn myself, but
Or just something like, make sure you're right before I'm like, I always say in my 400 IM, make sure you negative split, right?
Mhm.
So I'm kind of thinking, or kind of giving myself mental notes of things to think about strategy wise.
Sure.
So I don't know if sprinters think about that, but I know that a lot of mid distance and distance swimmers think about that too. Like, where do I push it? Where do I hold back a little bit? Okay. And then, like, where do I really need to focus my technique? That's
Mhm.
one thing I did all the time. I need to focus on my technique, my breaststroke. So I need to really kind of zone in on that a little bit in my races. But in the freestyle, it's just get up and go, and thinking about all those stuff and keeping very light mental notes about those things in your head.
Yeah, all while you're 100% outputting with your body like that.
Yeah.
That's something that's just so crazy that you guys are able to do that.
Yeah, you gotta reduce the thinking.
Yeah.
A lot. It's just like, a lot of people just say, don't think, just swim. That's true. That's like one of the things I have to remind myself too, because I like to overthink a lot.
Sure, and especially when so much preparation goes into it, and it all kind of, and that's something when I'm watching the Olympics, like, and this applies to any kind of championship level meet, but an entire year, 4 years, a lifetime of preparation, of training, of dedication, all comes to the one moment that could be erased by a bad start, by missing a turn, and that kind of moment is just always so fascinating to me. That like we're watching the Olympics, like this is the biggest moment in all of their careers, without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
Even with those that have Olympics to come, if they're a younger swimmer, this is the biggest moment, and we watch it heat after heat after heat, and that's the big for me. One of the biggest things that captivate me about the Olympics and about just kind of championship level athletics.
Yeah, this is like, this isn't like, I know that tennis, like, in tennis, they don't take the Olympics as seriously as they do Wimbledon.
Sure.
Or the US Open even. Or US Open.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the matches, like the Olympics, that is the biggest meet in Olympic swimming. Or basketball, the same thing. It's
Sure.
like, I've heard, I don't watch Olympic basketball, but
Sure.
I've definitely heard that the US is just overwhelmingly dominant in basketball.
Yeah, both men's and women's.
Yes, exactly. It's just so, but yeah, it's the pinnacle of, and you, I'm glad you brought up the whole, you swim for 4 years only to compete, and it could be messed up by a bad start, because there's a way to approach that too.
Yeah.
Swimming's a great thing to learn. There's a great thing to learn about that when it comes to swimming. It's like, you train your butt off consistently for a really, really long time, only to compete at one meet in the season. You're training for one meet. And, sometimes you move up. We went
Yeah.
to NICs, we had some people go to NCAAs, but you are training for conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You are swimming for that one meet. And so you just have to, it taught me a really valuable lesson about, you can't put too much weight on that last meet and how you do, because at the end, like, it'll destroy you in the end.
Yeah.
It'll mentally destroy you. You have to realize that, like, the process is what matters.
Yeah.
I always say that my favorite race is my 400 IM my junior year, and the reason why, wasn't the best time, not even really close, but it is the best hardest swum 400 IM that I've ever swam in my life, and that's all I care about. So,
like, you feel the most personal kind of satisfaction to that.
yes,
Regardless of what happened.
and that is the best way to approach swimming. I just see some of these swimmers. I coach a swimmer too. It's just like, she drops 7 seconds in 100-meter butterfly. This is a minute and 20-second race for these kids.
Mm-hmm.
She's crying after it. And I'm like, what is going on? She's
Yeah,
like,
that's a big time drop.
state championship, 100 fly in a relay. She's like, I let the relay down. I'm like, what are you talking about? You just swam your butt. You barely be able to talk to me because you're so gassed
Yeah,
out,
you can. How can
And
you cry when you're so winded, right? And
exactly.
sometimes it's
But that's what happens when you fall into that trap of dehumanizing yourself to a set of times and numbers. So, yeah.
yeah, and I love, and that's why I always love talking to you about this, like whether on the show or not, because I love your perspective of the mental side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I know, and I'm sure part of that comes from like you kind of hinted at, like falling into that trap. You've been kind of on the dark side of it and kind of changing your mentality to kind of come up more towards the sunshine. But like, not to bring up a bad time or anything, but like, when did you make that mental switch to look at stuff more positively for your own sake, almost?
Uh, my junior year of college, I pretty much my entire life was chasing cuts and numbers and times, and even when I was getting recruited, that was the worst. Like
Yeah,
if I could say to anything to anybody who's getting recruited is just focus on yourself. You'll find the right school.
yeah,
Like I did. But it's just I was so hyper fixated on everything, and it creates this mental energy in you that burns you out,
hmm,
and you can ignore that burnout, but you will at one point have to face it, and it's basically like it's like it's kind of like you have one little mine you set right here,
yeah,
and another one you set right here, and another one. This is you ignoring burnout, right? You're
yeah,
just setting these mines down. There's one button that you have to press, right? And you might have to go through that burnout. But I went through that burnout, and I had to learn the hard way that you can't dehumanize yourself to a set of numbers, and with swimming you do that all the time because people value you based off of your times. That's
yeah,
and so that even that metaphorical, just having a person, an event they're specialized in, and then a number is just, it's an awful process that you have to realize that you are a human. There's a reason that you joined the sport.
yeah.
That was the biggest thing, is like this is actually a funny example. You've seen Inside Out too?
I have not, but I've been looking
Okay.
forward to it.
One of my favorite things about the fact about Inside Out 2 is they brought in like Riley, who's a student athlete,
Yeah,
and she joins hockey, because it's an escape for her, because it's nice for her, and I think what happens when you get really successful and you get really, into swimming, you
yeah,
sacrifice your well-being for like the sake of a time because you're so eager to chase these things,
hmm,
right? And then, but you don't take care of your health, right? And then you become so hyper obsessive to the point where it becomes unhealthy. And that's where you burn out. And that's where you overtrain or under recover. Those things work hand in hand. But like, I had to realize that I got to that point where I was just like, I burnt out to the point where, I was barely eating, barely sleeping, still practicing, 2 hours of sleep every week, studying, still trying to get my major,
yeah. Still being a student.
Yeah, still being a student while being an athlete. And I was fried. My brain was fried. And so I took a step back and I realized, why is this killing me?
Right.
This is the sport that I used as an escape. So that was the one thing that was like, I faced that burnout and I realized like why I joined swimming. It was for an escape. It was an outlet. So yeah, and I let my biggest outlet become my biggest stressor in
Right.
life. So yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up to kind of relay it to the Olympics. Every single swimmer that you guys are watching on NPC, every single semifinals heat, every medal race, everyone's going through that. every athlete that you see has this lifetime of build up to the one moment that you get to see them. But after that moment, they have to process all that. They are still that person after you see them. And that's not something that is, you know, flashy to watch, you know,
Yeah.
like for broadcasting's sake, like that's not shown. But understand, when you guys are watching these Olympics, everyone has to understand and face the fact, oh wow, I got 8th place in the 100 free. That's a big mental weight to bring with you, you know, and kind of bring it to I don't want to call out the American swimmers for that, but they have to face that. They have they have another 4 years, hopefully, to deal with that. Understand it's a big deal. I just wanted to make sure that you guys understand that when you're watching swimming.
Yeah, it's such a big deal. I mean, like, and you can see how much pressure these athletes face. So I'm a big tennis fan.
Sure.
And I watched the other day Djokovic, who's probably one of the greatest tennis players of all time, versus Nadal. And Nadal's like he's he's more of a veteran, but he's still really good. And so, but Djokovic was projected to win that. But you saw this like series of points where Djokovic was just getting nailed by serves, by tiny mistakes, and I just heard the announcer say, you know, he's human. Like this shows that, you know, the athletes are a little bit human. He still ended up winning it, but it's just like that. I don't want to say that that pressure, you don't want to pretend that doesn't exist. You should recognize, you know, that exists. And Mitch even said this on his, you know, talk with you. Pressure is a privilege, and that's a great way to reframe pressure. But you also just have to realize that the reason why you're there is because of the love you put into that sport.
Yeah.
Like, you put in time, you put in effort, you put in everything that you put in because you loved it. And so you just have to keep doing that. And that's all that matters. That is all that matters, I think.
No doubt. And you wouldn't be able to put all that time in if you didn't love it.
Yeah.
That's that's my understanding. For any kind of passion that anybody has, you wouldn't do it if you didn't love it to some degree.
Exactly. And if you get 8th place at an Olympic final and you enjoy the sport less, I think you need to reconsider why you're swimming.
Right. You got to take a step back.
Yeah, 100%.